Welcome, everyone. We are just preparing for the video to start. The first intervention will be a pre-recorded video. So as soon as we make sure it works, then we will start our event in a minute. Welcome, everyone, to our side event, The Crisis in Manipur and the Implications for Human Rights in India. Just before we start, just a few housekeeping notes. We will have two ladies who are in the back taking a few photos from the back and of the panel. If anyone has any objection with the photos, please let us know. We'll be taking a few photos, and no one else will be able to take the photos during this event. Our event will be live broadcast on YouTube, just so you know. If anyone is using the microphone, please turn off the microphone when you're done with the conversation. We'll start now, okay? So before we start the video, Marcus, I'm gonna do the introduction and then with video, okay? So India is often in the news, making headlines. Recently in the G20 summit, the moon landing, the rapid economic growth all made headlines in India. India has become the most populous nation on earth. However, this year, India has also made headlines for less than fortunate reasons. Violence against ethnic and religious minorities, hate speech carried by political and media personalities, laws that deny the right to religious conversion, caste discrimination, and the undermining of the civic space have all made headlines. The violence in the state of Manipur this year that started in the month of May caught most of the attention, namely following the videos of sexual violence that spread. Muslims are also the target of attacks, most recently in Haryana and Gurugram in northern India. At the start of this Human Rights Council session, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. Volker Turk, said there is a clear need to redouble efforts to uphold the rights of all minorities in India by dealing in a forthright manner with intolerance, hate speech, religious extremism, and discrimination. This is why we are holding our panel to address all these issues, to discuss the path forward, and to ensure that all human rights for all people in India are respected. I welcome everyone on behalf of the World Evangelical Alliance and the Coalition for Minority Rights, all our partner organizations representing diverse religious and ethnic groups. First, we're gonna watch a pre-recorded video by Mr. Nouri Turkel, who is attorney, author, foreign policy expert, and advocate on human rights, but also a United States commissioner in the United States Commission for International Religious Freedom. We're gonna watch this 5-minute video where he will be sharing with us on their work and this effort, and then we will move to the panelists, please.
Hello, everyone. I am Nouri Turkel, a commissioner at the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, or commonly known as USCIRF. Thank you very much to the India Coalition for Minority Rights for putting this event together today and for inviting me to be part of it. I regret that I'm not able to attend in person, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you about religious freedom conditions in India. As many of you know, USCIRF is an independent, bipartisan U.S. federal government agency that is dedicated to promoting the universal right to freedom of religion or belief abroad. USCIRF seeks to defend religious freedom internationally for people of all faith and of none. Throughout the year, we monitor religious freedom conditions abroad and make policy recommendations to the President, Secretary of State, and Congress. Today's event addressing the ongoing situation in Manipur is timely and should be a matter of deep concern for all those nations gathered here at the UN Human Rights Council. USCIRF has been closely following the developments since May, when initial clashes broke out between state's tribal Christian community and the Hindu majority. Over the last 4 months, over 50,000 people have been displaced and nearly 200 lives have been lost. Violence has included acts of sexual violence, destruction of property, forced displacement, and extrajudicial killing. Specifically, the waves of violence have been targeted at religious symbols and places of worship and refuge, including churches and synagogues. In total, more than 200 churches of different denominations and 2 synagogues have been burned or damaged. In these and other instances, the quick spread of disinformation and hate speech on social media has stalked mob vigilantism and other types of communal violence. In Manipur, hate speech targeting the minority Christian population has contributed and been used to justify widespread atrocities. While international bodies such as UN have elevated information about the situation in Manipur, the Indian government has sought to control the narrative about what is taking place. It also has targeted those reporting on it or who vocalize their dissent. Over the last several months, the government has blocked journalists and media coverage in the state and has accused them of trying to provoke clashes. Earlier this month, authorities in Manipur filed criminal charges against 4 journalists, accusing them of misrepresenting the facts. The Indian government's silencing of those advocating and reporting on religious freedom conditions in the country is an unfortunate trend. These recent events in Manipur are another disappointing and deeply troubling milestone in India's deteriorating religious freedom conditions. Over the last several years, religious freedom conditions have been on a worrying trajectory, exacerbated by the Indian government's promotion and enforcement of laws, policies that target religious minorities. Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, Dalit, and Adivasis are experiencing increased level of attacks and acts of intimidation. At USCIRF, we have been repeatedly recommended that State Department designate India as a country of particular concern, or CPC, for its systematic, ongoing, and egregious religious freedom violations. During Prime Minister Modi's recent visit to Washington, we urged the Biden administration to raise the issue of religious freedom during their public and private engagements. When directly asked about India's treatment of religious minorities during a White House press conference, Prime Minister Modi responded that, quote, "There is no space for discrimination," end quote, in India, and suggested that steps did not need to be taken to advance religious freedom in the country. And yet last month, Prime Minister Modi faced a vote of no confidence for his government's response to the conflict in Manipur. The targeting of religious minorities in Manipur and throughout India cannot continue to be ignored. We will continue to raise these issues with the State Department and to make recommendations that take these abuses seriously, particularly the importance of designating India as a CPC. Thank you very much again for the opportunity to speak to you.
We are grateful for Mr. Turkel for sharing with us this pre-recorded video message. Now I will move to our panel in the room. I am very grateful to have with us now, who will be sharing with us, Ms. Florence Lowe. Ms. Florence is the founding member and president of the North America Manipur Tribal Association, NAMTA. NAMTA was founded in May 2023, so this year, in response to the attacks on the Kuki-Zomi Christian people of Manipur in India. She was born in Manipur in India and is a member of the Guite tribe, I hope I'm saying these names right, which is one of the many tribes under the Kuki-Zomi umbrella. We are very grateful that you are with us, Florence, and we'll be grateful that you share with us about what had happened in Manipur and what should be done to make things right.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. At 11 p.m. on May 3rd, my mother, who was 77 years old at the time, Aichung Guite, my sister-in-law, 13-year-old niece, 5-year-old twin boy and girl, and 2-year-old nephew were attacked by an evil and misguided Meitei Hindu mob. They ran a few doors down to a Meitei Hindu neighbor's house to hide in his dirty, dingy storehouse. There were so many mosquitoes, my mother says. The children were so good. They did not cry or make a noise. They huddled there for over 3 hours as mayhem continued around them. They heard the sounds of stones, sticks, rocks, cars and gas cylinders bursting into flames. Angry mobs had burnt their church, a Baptist church, earlier that evening, and were attacking and burning their neighbors' houses and had turned to their house. They escaped with their lives and the clothes they were wearing, while our beautiful family home was burned and looted. The mob even came back to burn the house again the next day on May 4th. To date, over 7,000 Kuki-Zomi tribal homes have been burned and destroyed. The attack on my mother was the attack on Paiteveng in Imphal, India. In Dallas, Texas, where I live, it was 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon when my sister texted me, "Have you talked to Mom?" I had no idea. I had no idea this fight had been brewing for a while, that our people had been fighting for our people, our lives, our lands. I'm ashamed to say that if my home had not been burnt that night, I might still not have been drawn into this fight. Today is the 19th of September, 2023. It has been 139 days since this crazy evil mob attacked my family home and my mother. They burned and stole not just everything my family owned in that house, but all our books, our photo albums, our memories, our refuge, and our peace of mind. It is now 76 years since India gained its independence and formed a fledgling nation, a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. Every single day, I get madder and madder at the inaction and utter ineptitude of the Indian government, and at the US and other Western governments and intergovernmental organizations for their inaction. I'm angry, frustrated, humiliated, and sad. In 139 days, over 6,500 complaints have been filed with the police. These complaints are a desperate plea by people following process and the laws of the land, while the government and the police itself are not following the rule of law and have instead allowed the rule of mob to run rampant like a virus in Manipur and throughout India. Over 300 plus people have been killed. The government of India does not acknowledge the full body count. Many bodies have not been returned to their families. Many women have been raped and gang raped. Over 360 churches have been burned and 2 synagogues. Over 60,000 people have been displaced. The Manipur State Police has allowed its arms and ammunition to be looted by the Meitei terrorists. The Chief Minister of Manipur openly sides with the Meitei terrorists. No state, central, or international aid has reached my people. The only aid we have received is from each other, which is our tribal way, and from many good people all over the world. Those are just statistics. These are real people who have been impacted. On the evening of May 3rd, Chingboy Paipi, who is a pastor's wife in Chicago, her elderly parents, both of whom are heart patients, had to hide in the dark, in the fields, in the open fields, along with her brother and her sister's families in Imphal, because the same large Meitei Hindu mob had burned the church just next to their house. They stayed there all night and managed to walk to an army camp in the morning. They stayed there for over a week before they were transported to safety by the Indian Army. On May 4th, Mrs. Gozavung, 57, a Manipur government officer, and her son, Mr. Golal Sang, 27, were pulled out of their car by a Hindu mob of about 200 vigilantes and beaten to death. They were trying to get to safety to an army camp. Her daughter-in-law was beaten, had to be admitted to the ICU with multiple head injuries and fractured wrists and fingers. Her daughter, sister, cousin, and a one-year-old grandson escaped with their lives after being sheltered by a Hindu family from the mob. They escaped in the trunk of their car after a day or two had passed. On May 4th, Mr. Vungsagin Valte, a Kuki-Zomi BJP MLA and advisor to the Chief Minister of Manipur, was beaten and left to die on his way back from a meeting with the Chief Minister. His security detail abandoned him and his driver at the hands of the mob. On May 5th, Florence Hangxing and Olivia Chongloy, two Kuki-Zomi tribal Christian women working at a car wash in Imphal, were attacked, gagged, and locked in a room from 5 to 7 p.m. They were tortured and gang raped. When the room was finally opened after 7 p.m., they were dead, their bodies mutilated. The room was filled with a horrifying mixture of blood, flesh, and hair. On May 6th, Mrs. Tiandam Baipe, a 45-year-old widow and mother of two, was killed. Her head, hands, and legs chopped off. She was also burnt with her house. On June 4th, a 7-year-old Kuki-Zomi boy, Tonsing, his mother, Mina, and her friend Lydia were burnt alive in an ambulance on their way to the hospital by the mob. The mob was led by Mira Paibi women. They thought they would be safe as the mother, Tonsing's mother, Mina, is a Meitei woman. On June 10th, Mrs. Dimkohoi, 65, was shot dead while she was praying inside her village church. She was among the 3 shot by Meitei militants wearing Manipur police uniforms and armored vehicles. On July 2nd, Mr. David Thiek Mar, 30 years old, was one of 3 people captured. His 2 friends were released, but because he belongs to the Mar tribe, which is one of the tribes under the Kuki umbrella, he was tortured and beheaded. His hands and legs were chopped off. His head was displayed on a bamboo fence. His body parts were thrown into a burning building. The killers posted a video of the severed head on social media with a voice in the background commenting, "This is the face of a Kuki. You look beautiful. You look beautiful. We've been trying to catch you people for a long time." The voice ended with an expletive. On July 6th, Mrs. Don Ngaiching, 62, was shot and killed outside a school in Imphal. She was mentally ill, often seen wandering the streets of Imphal, and had refused to leave Imphal feeling she was safe. She was not. On July 19th, a video surfaced of 2 Kuki-Zomi women being paraded naked, molested, and gang raped on May 4th by Meitei mob. These women and their families had run to the police for refuge, but the police handed them over to the mob. The young brother of one woman was beaten to death while trying to protect his sister. The husband of the other woman is an Indian Army officer. My name is Florence Nianghoilun Lo. I'm a daughter of the Guite clan. The Guite clan belongs to the Paite tribe. The Paite are one of the Zo community tribes, the ones they're calling Kuki. We are Zo, Kuki, Thado, Paite, Mar, Gangte, Baipe, Simte, and a few more tribes. We ask for peace and justice and to be allowed to practice our religion and our customs without persecution. We ask for our right to self-determination and self-governance without fear of mob vigilantism or discrimination and attacks from our own government officials. We are Zo united. Thank you, Wissam.
Thank you, Florence, for sharing your testimony. Thank you for your depiction of what happened. We are gathered here because the Human Rights Council is meeting upstairs, but we need a reminder that things aren't going well in the world, and we need a reminder that violations are taking place so that we as civil society and we as part of the global community here and the Human Rights Council, we take action to prevent, to stop, to hold people accountable for what you just described. Thank you for sharing, for your testimony. Now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Hena Zuberi. Ms. Hena Zuberi is the Director of Advocacy for Justice for All based in Washington, D.C. She co-chairs the India Working Group at the International Religious Freedom Roundtable. She directs all the congressional and U.S. administration outreach for Justice for All campaigns. She also hosts the Justice for All Now show on the Muslim Network TV and is the lead anchor on the nightly Muslim News channel. So thank you, Hena, for being with us, and we are grateful that we are partnered with Justice for All, with part of the big coalition, our coalition. And now I would like to give you the floor.
Thank you for having me here at the Human Rights Council's 54th gathering. As you heard the details of the egregious pogrom in Manipur, and yes, I call it a pogrom intentionally, as 269 churches cannot be burnt in 36 hours without pre-planning and intent. Pogroms are targeted acts of ethnic violence that exploit existing fissures and stem from the desire to show a community their place, and are seen as an act of retribution for their imagined sins. The aim is to desensitize the general population to anti-minority violence and move towards a, quote, final solution. Most importantly, pogroms embody the participation of the state in planning, instigation, or inaction and tolerance. In the Indian context, the term pogrom has been used thrice before to signify the scale of the Gujarat massacres in 2002, the anti-Sikh violence in 1984, and the Delhi pogrom in 2020. We're grateful that the United Nations has noted these egregious attacks on tribal minorities. The UN High Commissioner of Human Rights, Volker Turk, mentioned Manipur specifically. Additionally, Mr. Turk noted that Muslims are often the target of attacks by the majority communities of India. Yet the government of India is quiet. No condemnations, no support for victims, but instead a silent approval by the leaders at the highest level and verbal hate against minorities by their minions at the lower levels of government. And this is the case in attacks on minorities across the nation. Silence is deadly. It is tacit approval, verbally encouraging mobs, as is done by Modi's political supporters, is a sign of direct approval. While Manipur has seen continued attacks against Christians, in the rest of India, Muslims face the brunt of attacks by the Hindu mobs aligned with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his political party, the BJP, which is the political arm of the extremist ideology of the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, the RSS. Hindu religious leaders aligned with the Prime Minister openly call for genocide against India's Muslims, with minimal response from the Indian government. The message is clear. Do to Indian Muslims what Burma has done to the Rohingya. These calls cannot be dismissed as being made by fringe elements, since the leader of these calls, Yati Narsingh Anand, leads the largest and the most influential organization of Hindu preachers in the country. Attacks against Muslims follow a pattern. Leaders make hate speeches to Hindu mobs against Muslims. A religious procession is then taken into areas of Muslim residents. Muslim religious places of worship are attacked, as are shops and homes. And the police stand by while mobs go on a rampage. Then Muslims are blamed for the violence. Their homes are then demolished, often without proper court orders. Soon after the attacks on Manipur, there was widespread violence in Nuh and Gurugram in the state of Haryana. This attack followed the same process that I just described. There have also been hundreds of lynchings of Muslims and Christians by cow vigilante mobs. The movement to punish Muslims and Christians using cow vigilantism as an excuse is increasingly dangerous. In Mathura, UP, following the attacks on Manipur, almost 90 Muslim homes were demolished. In Kashmir, a disputed territory, this was the only Muslim majority region. India continues a brutal military occupation of the region. Reports from the area claim that many demolitions are happening, which mostly go unreported. In addition to the military occupation of the region, press freedoms are brutally curtailed. Media outlets such as the Kashmirwala have been blocked in India. Its founder, Fahad Shah, was arrested under draconian anti-terrorism laws, which are often used to stifle dissent with the ruling party and authorities. Human rights defenders, such as Khurram Parvez, are also still behind bars. India's anti-minority actions can be analyzed as parallels to the methods used by the German Nazi Party against the Jewish and Roma population. Justice for All has analyzed 12 parallels between Nazi Germany and the methods being used in India. This research report is available online. Justice for All has a 30-year record of working on genocide prevention. The Holocaust Museum Early Warning Project alerts the world of risks of mass atrocities in India. The signs of an impending mass murder of Muslims in India or mass disenfranchisement are clear. While we may not see the same piles of bodies as we have seen in Rwanda, India's 250 million Muslims are in danger. I'd like to get your attention to the legal definition of the word genocide, which is very precise and includes an element that is often hard to prove, the element of intent. The determination as to whether a situation constitutes genocide is legally complex and should be made following a careful and detailed examination of the facts against relevant legislation. We call on member states to start these investigations into genocide or crimes against humanity in India. This must be done by competent international or national court of law with the jurisdiction to try such cases after an investigation meeting appropriate due process standards. According to Article 9 of the Genocide Convention, disputes related to its interpretation, application, and fulfillment, including state responsibility, should be addressed to the ICJ. We urge member states to take the case of India to the International Court of Justice. The international community has a responsibility, the responsibility to protect. The convention established a duty on state parties to take measures to prevent and to punish the crime of genocide. So to prevent, by enacting relevant legislation, we ask the member states to fulfill their responsibility. Just yesterday, the Canadian PM said that they have evidence that India has murdered a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil. This is both a breach of diplomacy as well as a human rights abuse spanning international borders. We are afraid that the influence imported by Indian workers aligned with Prime Minister Modi will continue to span international boundaries. Here are our recommendations. We recommend that a resolution is introduced asking for betterment and transparency about human and religious rights issues in India and a repeal of draconian laws. We ask to institute a special investigative mechanism for human rights as recommended by the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues, Fernand de Varnez, as has been done for Burma and Syria. We ask to allocate a research desk to examine the parallels between the methods used in India and report it to the High Commissioner at the earliest to report on the instances where hate speech has directly resulted in violence against Muslims and other minorities. We ask to start punitive measures against the religious and political leaders calling for genocide and violence against India's Muslims. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for also sharing with us about additional aspects of the violence, discrimination, and threats to minorities that exist in India. As the World Evangelical Alliance, we advocate in India for freedom of religion and protection for everyone, because we cannot protect one community without everyone being protected. We are grateful for our partnership and being together, working together towards democracy, human rights, and respect for the integrity and human dignity of everyone in India. So the conversation has many aspects. It has a religious freedom aspect, has a minorities aspect, but inevitably it has an aspect of violence against girls and women in India. This is why I'm very grateful that we have on the panel with us Mrs. Reem Al-Salem, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, Its Causes and Consequences since 2021. Ms. Al-Salem is a Jordanian national, and she holds a master's degree in international relations from the American University of Cairo. And we are very grateful for being outspoken on this. The special rapporteurs and herself, they issued a statement on the situation in India, specifically Manipur, a few weeks ago that you can find. I'm very grateful for shedding a light through your statement on this matter and for being with us on the panel. I give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Wissam, and also thank you to the World Evangelical Alliance and all organizers, as a matter of fact, for organizing this event and for spotlighting the situation in Manipur and India. In many ways, I insisted to come at the end of this panel because I feel that it was important to hear from the victims and also from the organizations that represent them. But also because it forms an easy segue into the points, the broader points about human rights in India with a focus on women and girls that I wanted to leave with you. So as Wissam mentioned, beginning of this month, on the 4th of September, a number of our special procedures raised the alarm regarding the credible reports we had received concerning very serious human rights violations and abuses in Manipur. Now, many of these allegations concern a number of different human rights violations, which were highlighted in the press release. And as Mr. Turkel mentioned, should be really of concern to all of us and to the entire international community. Being the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and the limited time, however, allow me to focus specifically on the sexual and gender-based violence that we have witnessed. I must say that many of my colleagues and I were really alarmed by the sheer number of reports that we had received directly of hundreds of women, mostly Christian cookies, that have been subjected to rape and other forms of egregious sexual violence. For many days, I couldn't get the image out of my head of Kuki women being paraded naked in the streets, which really shocked, I think, many of us here today. And we know that these videos, of course, came out only much later because of the internet block, which is not uncommon, by the way, when incidents like this occur. Also very shocking was the fact that the reports also included older women, so women really of all ages, but women above 60 were not spared the incidents according to the reports that we had heard. And as Florence mentioned, we also received the same accounts of women being subjected to gang rape, burning of women until death, burning of corpses of women, denial of dignified burial rights, hacking of women to death, beating them to death, etc. What is of course concerning is that this is like an example of a wider trend we have seen also in many parts of the world of using high levels of threats or actual violence against women, certain women, because of their identities because they belong to certain minorities, as a tool of war, but also as a tool of subjugation of the wider community and of punishment. And here, in this case, it's women really belonging to religious and ethnic grounds. We have, of course, as you know, requested, or as you can imagine, further information clarification from the government of India regarding these events, as we usually do. But also we have asked specifically about the role of law enforcement during these incidents and the response by the Indian national institutions and as well the Indian justice system. We continue to monitor the situation of Manipur. In fact, the fact that it continues to be volatile and fragile is one of the reasons also we issued the press release, because it's not a situation that has subsided. So we wanted to really draw attention to it. And the events that happened in Manipur are in many ways variations of situations and themes that we have seen play out in different parts of the country to varying degrees of intensity and seriousness, and that the special procedures have engaged on quite consistently. So I want to speak actually to 8 of these broader, let's say, aspects that are at play here. One is that we are seeing a deterioration of the situation of religious and ethnic minorities and their treatment in India, as well as freedoms. And as I mentioned, women belonging to these minorities are particularly at the receiving end of intimidations, threats, and acts of violence. 2, we continue to see impunity for crimes of violence committed against women in general, but also more so for women, against women that belong to minority groups, where really the perpetrators of violence feel enabled and feel like they have a carte blanche, basically, to commit this violence. And this is in a way linked to the issue of impunity for the crimes committed, in the specific instance also against women and girls, whether in the public or private sphere. The third point is the need really for prompt, impartial investigations of acts of violence against women, which continue really to be insufficient, as well as the importance really of getting accountability and justice. And that, as you can imagine, requires protecting survivors of violence from further attacks, requires a victim-sensitive approach, requires giving them conditions of confidentiality, and also requires safety and security in the areas where they live when it's restitution. We did say, and I still believe, that national human rights and justice institutions in India have an important role to play to monitor the actions taken by the government, but also to ensure that justice is served. They must do so in an impartial, timely, and effective manner, which is what we had also requested in our engagements with the government. The fourth issue is, of course, the very concerning fact that also a number of speakers referred to here, including Henna, that the actions in Manipur were preceded or accompanied by really high levels of hate speech inciting violence against minority communities, against women specifically, and which need to be dealt with in a much more robust, decisive manner. Last year, by the way, the mandate also intervened on the situation of Muslim women that were auctioned on the internet. And that was also, I mean, it carries a lot of the elements that we are also addressing here. The sixth point is, which is related to the aforementioned points, is, of course, the legal and policy frameworks overall to deal with violence against women and girls on intersecting grounds needs also to be improved, particularly to prevent and respond to these forms of violence. And here we have to look at the intersecting grounds for violence that have to be prevented. So violence is committed because they are women, but also, as I said, because they are minorities of religious and racial and other groups. And to address also not only the existence of discrimination in law, but also in practice. And I was very glad to hear the High Commissioner for Human Rights also alluding to this in his speech. Related to better policy is, of course, the need for better disaggregated data. I note with concern that the collection, or at least the publication of disaggregated data on violence against women is not being published as regularly as it should. And the seventh point is the importance of ensuring that women and girls that are victims of violence can get access to immediate medical, psychological care, life-saving needs. We heard about the insufficient humanitarian response really to all those affected in Manipur, including by the state, and also Florence mentioned that. But in addition to that, of course, survivors of sexual and gender-based violence have very specific needs and need to get that also responded to. And as a final point is the duty to strengthen the protection of human rights defenders, also to protect them from intimidation and threats, also allow them to do the work that they are supposed to do, as the Declaration on Human Rights Defenders says so, and which places really a very clear responsibility on states to protect, promote, and implement all the human rights and fundamental freedoms. So these recommendations basically are relevant to Manipur, but they're relevant also to other situations. And I will close by saying that, of course, these tragic and avoidable, but also unacceptable situations can be an opportunity to turn situations around and to address the underlying causes. And I sincerely hope that this will be the last Manipur that we will see in India, but also beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Al-Salem. We echo your hopes that this would be the last Manipur in India. We echo the hopes of everybody that the Indian government would take action, step up, and address the underlying causes, the causes for this violence and for this extreme violence against minorities and for the threat of future violence against minorities. Now that our panelists have all shared what they wanted to share, I would like now to open the floor. We have 10 minutes where we could hear if there are any questions that could be answered by the panelists. Please go ahead.
I want to know what is the current situation in Manipur, because I'm originally from Manipur, and I want to know the impact to both the Kuki-Zomi and the Métis, because they're physically and geographically separated. And I also know that the Impal city has all the advanced education institution, the hospitals, the advanced diagnostic centers, and the airport. What is the impact to both population?
Thank you. I guess this question would be to Florence. I would just like to add, I mean, we've heard that the situation now, the violence is over and situation is better. Can you just briefly update us briefly on this? Thank you.
Thank you, Assam, and thank you for that question. The violence is not over. Even as I just read this, so I'm a little disturbed by this, but on the 18th of September, a priest of the Syro Malabar Church in South India died last Thursday because he posted on WhatsApp about this crisis, and he had a FIR lodged against him just for speaking up against this issue. Even I, myself, as an American citizen, have been targeted on social media and on the internet with my name out there and putting my family in the US and in India at risk. On September 8th, 12th, and 13th, 7 people were killed, and you referred to the lack of medical care in the hill districts. One of the incidents that happened on one of those dates was because of a medical emergency that 3 people were on the road for, and they were killed by terrorist Métis organizations without any support from the Manipur police. so the situation, and of course, I saw the response of the Indian mission to the UN in New York, and they claim that things are peaceful in Manipur. They are not peaceful.
Thank you. Would there be any more questions? I will just take from the gentleman brief question if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Amjad Yusuf. I live on the line of control on the Pakistani side. I just want to share two incidents, very recent incidents. There's a ceasefire on the line of control between India and Pakistan for last 4 years. There are two incidents, one on the 24th of June this year, 5 kilometers from my home. 3 farmers were working in their field. They were shot dead by the Indian army with snipers from the other side of line of control. And then another incident on the 22nd of August in another area, Nakyal. A person who was working in the field was hit by the snipers.
Do you have a question for the panel?
Yeah, my question is, my comment is that I see Indian government as a fascist government. If you take the position of the person killed in Toronto or Canada, the person killed across LOC, and what is happening in Manipur, what is happening with other minorities, this all is because
Thank you, sir.
the person who is in charge of the Indian government.
Yeah, thank you. If you have a question for the panel, just to make, we have a lot of people who'd like to ask questions. Do you have any question for the panel?
My question is from the panel that what is the way the international institutions like the Human Rights Council can play its role to stop these atrocities across Indian Union, in Kashmir, in Manipur, against Christians, against Dalits.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I will just try to answer the question of how the Human Rights Council can address the situation. Would like anyone have an idea? Would you like to share?
I can speak from the perspective of the special procedures, which report to the council. Our duty, which we try to do, is to draw attention to concerning situations from our respective mandates and hope that the council can deal with it adequately and take measures on them. I think we should remember the council has also a preventative role. So not just to respond once things become out of hand, but really also to intervene in a timely manner so that things don't get to a worse situation. So we hope that the council will also do that. You referred, Florence, to the recommendation by my colleague, the special rapporteur on minorities. So there is a lot more that can be done when it comes to India. Yeah.
So we have the lady raise her hand just before, gentleman. So if you can, and then later we can go to the gentleman there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. This is directed for Hannah Zuberi with Justice for All. Thank you for mentioning some of the injustices regarding all minorities, including Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Dalits, etc. My question is, what specific asks and recommendations do you have for the UN member countries?
Thank you for that, and thank you for that question. I would suggest that country representatives engage with the ambassador of India to the United Nations, as well as the country's ambassador, and first express their deep concern about the targeting of religious minorities, home demolitions, sexual violence, express that a pattern of attacks is forming, which cannot be ignored. We would also urge member countries to ask for a statement from the Indian Prime Minister condemning the calls for violence, for genocide, for the othering of Indian citizens of minority descent. And ask for the rejection of hate and religion politics. And this usually takes place right before an election is taking place. 2024, there is an election going to be taking place. Minorities should not be the scapegoat to win votes. And as we call India a plural, secular democracy, the largest democracy in the world, you cannot have a democracy without rights of minorities being protected. As I mentioned earlier, these laws, these anti-terrorism laws, UAPA, these are all asks that countries who do trade and other member countries can request that these sedition and anti-terrorism laws not be used on human rights defenders, on journalists, on people, on people who dissent against the government. And as their trade negotiations are taking place, do an independent assessment of human and religious rights in abuses. Some of this, your trade negotiations need to have maybe a human rights advocate on your team when you're going in to have these negotiations. We need a stable South Asia. The way things are going right now, you will not have a stable South Asia nor a stable India. So for the benefit of the region, for the benefit of trade investments and everything else that seems to be on a higher scale than human life, I would suggest if you are not concerned about human life, you should be concerned about your trade investments.
Thank you. The Special Rapporteur, Ms. Al-Salem, asked to share a bit more.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, of course, as independent experts, our role is not only to express concern. We do also offer our expertise at the services of many stakeholders, including governments. And many of us continue to be very interested in visiting India on official visits, and also on engaging and supporting all stakeholders in India in order to address these issues and improve prevention and response mechanisms. So that offer is still very much there. And I hope the government will also take us up on that.
I yet again echo what your hopes that India would accept the visits of all the special rapporteurs asking to visit. The gentleman, can you just introduce yourself and ask a question? Yes. We just have a few more minutes, if you can brief.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Kuraizam Athoba, and I am a Meitei, the so-called Meitei Hindu that people around here are talking about. So as this is a platform of United Nations, I think everyone has a right to know the real facts and the truth that we need to address what's happening in Manipur. And I've been listening to all the panel members who have been narrating the stories. And I won't narrate on rhetorics. I will come out with facts and figures and digitally proved records and data which nobody can't manipulate in any ways. So first of all, when we talk about the Hindu majority issues, we as a Meitei in Manipur is not a majority. For the rest of India, it's a different case. When it comes to northeastern states of India, Meitei is not a majority anymore. We represent hardly around 8.5 lakhs population. And the Christians in Manipur is around 12 lakhs. They comprise of around more than 54%.
Sorry,
and Meitei
I don't want
to
interrupt you, but if you could just be as short as possible. We still have 3 minutes for the room.
No,
so
but
if you could
we need to clarify the facts, because if you are narrating in the wrong context, we need to check it out. Or shall we go on with the wrong facts? We continue this debate and discussion. What's your intention then? We need to check it out. Number one, the religious card is never an issue in the Manipur violence, because Meitei never targeted Christians. Meitei also has a Christian population of around, which is 45% of what the Kuki populations are, Meitei Christians. And they missed to inform that Meitei churches are being completely vandalized and razed in the Kuki-dominated areas in Churachandpur, right on the first day before the target began in Imphal.
Okay, sir.
That needs to be acknowledged.
Thank you. Thank you.
And here is the sequence of events.
I would be grateful if we can meet after this and take the document and have the conversation.
Sure.
But if you don't have any more questions, I would need to interrupt you because we have 2 minutes before we need to close this event, and I need to give the final word to this panel. So I need to interrupt you just because we have 1 more minute, the lady from the United Nations. So we have to basically conclude the event.
Yes.
Thank
last
you.
part.
Thank
last
you for
question.
sharing. No,
last
question. We will meet after the event.
But allow me, let the audience know. Let the audience know.
Yes.
Why are we completely neglecting the issue of narco-terrorism?
We need to have
The UN Odyssey has already reported Churachandpur has a become a hub of new Golden Triangle.
Okay.
Poppy cultivations has
We need
already.
to have the concluding remarks from the panel and conclude the
Yeah,
event.
before that, we need to know the facts. That's why I'm trying to intervene.
Thank you, and we would welcome this. It's just that
It's completely one-sided discussion, so I don't want it. It should be neutral.
we are not a one-sided discussion.
Then you should have the
a lot
patience
of
to
the
listen to
facts
me.
were presented thoroughly, and there's a lot that we can provide after this event. Thank you.
Almost
So
19
I
Meitei
would
villages,
I would like now
19 Meitei villages completely 100% evicted, destroyed.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Can you switch off the microphone, please? So I would like us to finish because we just finished the time for our event and for the time allocated to have this room. I'm grateful for the panel for having shared with us and for your contribution. I've been following personally as the World Evangelical Alliance very closely what is happening in India and Manipur and elsewhere. I'm very grateful for what you shared with us and what you provided. What our hope is that India would grow into a more democratic, inclusive society and community where the government is supportive and protective of all the religious minorities and all the ethnic minorities and everyone in India. And yet again, I want to appreciate the panel for being here, for sharing, and for all the members of our coalition representing various communities, religious and ethnic communities, for being part of this event. And again, once again, thank you for Ms. Al-Salim, and thank you also for Mr. Turkel, who were present with us and shared with us on the situation in India. Thank you so much, and until the next event, God bless you.